Okay, so we are starting the session. Before we get into the session, the first thing is I am very happy to see so many of you join in again. Evening. Okay, just admitting. All right. Yes. So the primary intention for us behind the Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. Okay, so the primary intention behind decoding the gene series and sharing genetic counseling experiences is to facilitate learning from real world journeys of various genetic counselors. This is just a disclaimer. These discussions are not intended to serve as a direct templates for conducting your own counseling sessions. Rather, these offer an opportunity to appreciate the breadth of approaches and challenges and strategies that are shaped by each counselor's individual perspective and the unique needs of each patient. Genetic counseling is an inherently individualized process. What works in one scenario may not necessarily apply to another, so we encourage everyone to use these insights as a learning tool, and recognizing that effective counseling always requires tailored strategies that are specific to each patient and context. Another disclaimer is we that we do record our sessions, and this is solely for the reason so that we can later provide it on our YouTube channel for anyone who is a future student or is a current practicing genetic counselor wanting to learn more about it can always just come back to and listen to it and watch the presentations. So, with that, I would like to welcome today's guests. She is Upasana Mukherjee. She did her master's from VIT and she is a level 2 PGCI certified counselor. Since her education, she has been working at a plethora of places, and she has worked at places including Eurofins, LifeCell, and NCGM. She is also currently a consultant senior genetic counselor at Apollo Hospital, Nova IVF Fertility Center, and at the Fetomat Foundation. And I have been very fortunate again to be able to invite someone who was my mentor at NCGM. So, Upasana, thank you so much for joining, and you can start.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sukriti. It is very, I'm overwhelmed to join here. I was following your sessions for many, like all this a long way, and I'm very happy to see so many new names. Now I feel like I'm really old now, and I don't know half of you. Earlier, like I used to know everybody who is coming in our group, So now I think I'm feeling a little old that I don't know many of your names even. That oh,
All of us know your name though. Whoever
oh,
is coming, we know that you're there.
that's pleasure. That's really nice of you. So shall we start today?
Yes.
Okay. So just before I start, I just wanted to give this thing that I'm not a very good orator, and I don't like to present my cases or something, and that's why I'm very silent person here. But then, what I chose when we discussed this topic, then I thought that I will share certain thing. This topic is very close to my heart. I have been working with the neurodevelopmental category of children with the children for a very long time. I think right now almost 7 8 years I have been working with them. So this is a topic where we face everyday challenges, especially from not only from the clinicians, the referring clinicians. It is a huge challenge to make the couple, the parents, the patients to understand that there is a need of genetic testing and genetic counseling for them too, because they're already in their practical life, they're so much devastated, they're so much exhausted. Not only mentally, they are also exhausted because of their financial conditions, but still making a choice of doing a test to understand the prognosis or to get the why this has happened to individuals. It's
आपका
itself.
वॉइस थोड़ा सा मुझे कम आ रहा है. इज इट जस्ट मी? इज इट क्लियर फॉर एवरीवन?
It is
Uh,
clear.
It's clear?
it's
Okay, then continue.
Yeah.
okay. So, with that perspective, I have brought in two cases, and I will not going very depth in the the genetic part of or the technical part of autism and neurodevelopmental diseases, but a very simple thing. And then I would really, really wish that this session becomes interactive one and we discuss our challenges, whoever joined us today. And it would be really nice if we can get to understand your perceptions that what you are facing for these people. My screen is visible, I
Yes.
guess. Right. So, today we are going to talk about autism and genetics. Of course, it is from a GC perspective because we all are genetic counselors here. So, it is our understanding of the disease and it is our understanding of the genetics, and but in a scientific manner, and what we do in the regular day in our OPD. So, I think the biggest question what we face right now, if somebody has a child with autism or somebody is planning for a family, the first question is, will my baby have autism? So recently I have seen a lot of podcast also. They're like that, आपके टूथपेस्ट में नमक है ऐसे. There is a thing that will my baby will have uh, autism. So that is a big question. After COVID period, we have all seen that WHO has given us a ratio for a frequency of 1 in 100 babies for having some kind of behavioral issues. So that has raised our red flags, all our flags, I think red, green, blue, whatever it is. Okay. But yes, there is a very big problem happening with the behaviors, with the brain development right now for our next generations. So it's a big question that will my baby have autism? So today, when we see autism cases, there are many types of autism cases. I will just get into this. But today, what we are going to do, the maximum cases, what we see is that there is no other manifestation. This is not a syndromic manifestation, but most of the time they are only coming with some kind of speech delay, some kind of autistic feature. They are there is no global developmental delay. There is no other organ specific condition or any dysmorphism, but there is autism. There is ADHD can be. So the first thing what we I'm going to discuss, because this is a very big challenge we face for this kind of cases, is the non-syndromic manifestation of autism. And the other one what we are going to discuss is family who are actually planning for their conception, and they have arrived to know whether they have a risk. So, just a little bit of understanding about genetics of autism spectrum disorder. We know we call it as a spectrum because it is not, we cannot define autism with a particular one type of manifestation. There are group of symptoms what we see, and it varies in the expression that somebody can have a very severe speech impairment, or somebody can have little bit of speech regression. There can be a cognitive impairment. There can be lot of developmental delay, but it is actually a spectrum. So there are a lot of things happening together, and that is why in general we call it as an autism spectrum disorder. Now this autism spectrum disorder, or rather I would take it under the bigger category, which is the neurodevelopmental disorders. These are basically can happen. They have a lot of influence, genetic influence. They can be due to the epigenetic factors, and they can also be because of the non-genetic factors, which we know as a environmental exposures. Okay, so genetic factors are very understandable right now. We all know that we can do certain tests like gene sequencing, like chromosomal microarray, where or some repeat testing, repeat TP-PCR and all, but we can understand the genetic perspective. But for the genetic and the non-genetic factor, still we do not have that much of an clinical testing available to understand their pathogenicity basically, or their etiology right now. So what we have seen that around 15 to 40% of these individuals with ASD, not atrial septum defect, but this is autism spectrum disorder, so will have an identifiable genetic cause. Now, so that means that we cannot identify all of them? No, we actually cannot identify. Whenever there is a brain functioning defect or there is a neurosynaptic defect is happening, we need to understand one fact that there is some gene which is actually getting upregulated or there is some gene which is getting actually downregulated. But what, where, and how these pathways and understanding these pathways are not that easy. Whatever testing is available, as I mentioned, our maximum yield of identifying this kind of genetic condition or the genetic factors behind an autism is around maximum 40%, now up to 45%. Okay, but rest of the cases still we do not know what exactly is happening. So around this, there are genetic cases. There can be all these heritable conditions are 52% we call it as a heritable condition, and that can also be in two parts. There are most of the mutations, which around 49.8% can be basically a heritable condition, hereditary condition, but there are 9.5% also which are known as the de novo mutation. So if we go back, if we come to our own own practice, then most of the non-syndromic cases they usually come back with a de novo mutation. Nowadays it is happening, and I think I will share certain views on that also. One second. So and there are conditions like there are inherited conditions which can be because of there, and these inherited conditions can also be in two types. One can be the gene defects and the other can be the chromosomal defects. Lot of microdeletion duplications are reported already. Very commonly we find this 1q22.1 duplication, 2p duplication, 16p12.1 duplications, and there are a lot of other genes like SHANK1, SHANK2, RNX1, N1. These are genes which are already reported to cause autism spectrum disease. And there are genes like there are genes like SNC2A. There are genes like ADNP. These are genes which are responsible for the de novo type variants, and they not only cause autism but they also can cause little other symptoms also. So when we talk about the gesting, the clinical policy, this is a paper where it has been reviewed, and they have lot of policies. They have given that who should be tested basically. Okay, so there are points that people with autism spectrum disorder, developmental delay, who should be screened and who should not be screened. These are the thing, right? Earlier there was a guideline from the Royal College and ACMG as well, that for any children who are coming back with neurodevelopmental condition or autism spectrum, we used to do microarray, chromosomal microarray. All these children were supposed to be offered all microarray as a second line of testing, as not a first line of testing. But the more time and by time being passed and there are more researches are coming on, genetic testing is no more second line testing. And nowadays ACMG says that if all the children who are coming back with this kind of conditions, irrespective of the family history, we can actually offer them genetic testing. What genetic testing, I will come later. Okay, so this was the basically the algorithm where it says that the first professional civil the first test should be the microarray, then the fragilis testing for the males, and then we were going for the exome. Now this is little bit of different situation. So we are going as for the exome also as a first line testing for many years conditions. So if I look the clinical evaluation and then we take a family history, this is a spectrum. We can have lot of indication from taking the history, as we know that in our job the history plays the main role, and with the history we can actually understand what kind of test we should actually offer and what are the syndrome, what are the thing we are looking at in the case. So if there is a dysmorphic child or having a congenital malformation, then it is relative to the neurodevelopmental or psychic disorder, we still would like to go for chromosomal microarray. But in the family history, if we look at the X-linked pattern, and then we see that only the boys are happening, boys are being affected, and there is a cause of ovarian failure in the mother or somebody in the family, then we can definitely think about Fragile X testing. Specific for girls with ID, this is something we see that you must have heard about Rett syndrome. Rett syndrome is suspected there, so we go for an MSCP2 analysis there. If we see that there are a lot of crisis periods started from after the birth, it is not only the manifestation of it is not the only the autism spectrum disease. There are a lot of metabolic crisis has happened, then definitely we can think about an inborn error screening which had led to the neurodevelopmental disease, and so on. So this kind of indications basically gives us an idea that what should we look for and what test we should offer to our patients. So this is the first case. Okay, so this is the first case. This case comes So, it is a 5 years, 8-month old male child presented with absent speech, hyperactivity, and mild facial dysmorphism. His antenatal history was not very eventful. His birth history comprises he carried after birth weight was 3.5 kg. Neonatal jaundice was not there. There was no birth asphyxia. There was no NICUST. Nothing crisis, no crisis has happened during the birth. Postnatally, motor milestones, all the motor development were actually achieved. There was no delay, but he still not has achieved speech, and there is a repetitive behavior, hand flapping, starting from the age of 2, where actually the parents identify that there is some problem happening. And hyperactivity. There was no regression. Regression is a very good marker for us to understand if a genetic heterogeneity is there actually. So regression is a big. It's just a suggestion. If you have any case like this, always ask in your patients that if any time the parents have felt that whatever the child actually has learned after a certain point or after a disease condition or something that has regressed. So that's a very important point to understand. Now, well, I examined, then we found that the child is normocephaly but has a triangular face, hypertelorism, large protruding ears, pointed mandible, and this looks like a familial, familial expression. So with this, the patient came and they were really wanted to know that what kind of why their child has actually autism, and they were also planning for certain other they are also planning for pregnancy. So they wanted to know if their next child will have a same kind of a disease or not. Further investigations were studied where we found that there was no history of seizures, but EEG was also done by the doctor, and this was normal. Fragile X, by the time the patient has come to me, it was already done and it found to be normal. And MRI brain we looked for, but there was no not done. When we look at the family history, so yes, so the mother is already pregnant right now, and there's only one case in the family. There was no other history in the family of, in association with autism or neurodevelopmental or global developmental delay, seizures. Nothing has happened in the family as such. Only this is a child. So with this, the counseling started. We do counseling that what is the scenario here? It is likely to be a non-syndromic autism. What is the recurrence risk for this non-syndromic autism? If we look at these papers, there are a lot of papers will say that nearly 20% of the babies with an affected older sibling will develop ASD. This is irrespective of being having a genetic cause for it. Okay, so if there is a child who of a parent who has autism, then their next children or their future children can have around 20% chance of risk of having ASD. Now this can be because of de novo, this can be because of epigenetic modifications, lot of things. But अगर कुछ भी ना मिले फिर भी this population empirical risk of 20% does stay back. So now, what tests to be done? So there are new papers where from 2023 there's a shift happening, where there was a comparative study was happening that what kind of test we should offer. As per the guideline, microarray was the first line testing, but then the more we understood autism and the more we understood the de novo causes of autism, the exome sequencing basically started taking a place. And this paper, it is a very important paper, and you can just take a reference and read later that it says a very good supporting effort, evidence given for the whole exome sequencing as a first tier test. They also mentioned that the 45% yield of the test can be only gained if we do a trio testing. So here these are the why many a times we get to see the reports as trio whole exome sequencing for these people, for these children. This is why this is the paper which actually has given us the support to to offer the patients for the trio testing, and it gives really good answers many a times. So this child was actually, this family was actually offered a trio whole exome sequencing. Okay, and let's see what happened there. So yes, I was just giving a lot of data, and this paper also, this has actually was published in JAMA, and they have screened almost 1,106 NDT patients with trio whole exome sequencing by simultaneously detecting the SNVs and CNVs, and achieved almost 46.1% of diagnostic yield. So this is a paper which can support our offering to the patient that why we want to go for a whole exome sequencing here as a trial. Again, sudden other paper, this paper also given us almost 50%. So the more we are understanding the exome sequencing and the genes, we are gaining for the better yield of this testing. So this was the report. What has happened here that this is a child. There are two mutations reported, two variants reported. One is in the PRUNE1, that is PRUNE1 gene, which is responsible for the neurodevelopmental disorder with microcephaly, hypotonia, and variable brain abnormalities. Now, but this is a known pathogenic, likely pathogenic variant. It is a deletion, which basically causes a frame shift. But then the child has, it is in a heterozygous status, which is basically, if you look at the report, the mother also has the heterozygous variant and child has heterozygous. So this disease, this in a neurodevelopmental disorder, this actually follows an autosomal recessive pattern. And there is another gene called ASPM, which is microcephaly with primary microcephaly. This also follows an autosomal recessive. This variant is reported as a pit pathogenic, but the child did not have it, the mother has it. So with this report, we found that there is nothing significant in the genetic background we have found in the child. This PRUNE1 was actually having a variable expression, and this can actually go for a lot of, there is a partial match with the child, but since we did not have a second hit for this child, in this child, so we cannot take it under consideration. So we haven't taken it under consideration, and these are the other mutations as a carrier test what were mentioned in the child in this report. The mother was found to be HPV carrier, safety carrier, and and the child was also found to be carrier for USH2A, which is for responsible for retinitis pigmentosa. But there is nothing matched between the father and the mother to also understand that if any other condition in the family can run and can be passed on to the next generation. So nothing significantly we actually found in this child. So then what was the post-test counseling? So when we do a pre-test counseling, these yields are always actually discussed. This is very important because as we understand that how much ever we say that there is a 80% of neurodevelopmental disorders are basically irresponsible, basically caused by genetic factors, but we definitely have to set the expectation of the parents that how much we are actually going to how much expectation we should have out of this testing. Okay, because these are costlier testing. So nowadays, though the price have dropped down for in our market, but then still 40,000 rupees spending and then not getting in our setup. I think people have this expectation कि test करवाया then we should get something, some we have done the test, we should get something out of it. I always tell my patients that no report is a happy report. Okay, when we have nothing in the report, certain times it is distressing, but then many a times it is actually very good that it is not a narrowing down our path of treatment or understanding of the disease, and we can do a lot of other things when it comes to a we can also think in this way that since there is no genetic background, the kind of prognosis what we are thinking, it can be better, right? So these expectations that what we can expect from the child, what we can expect from this report, what is the if we get something in the child, what can be the further could due course of understanding the disease and inheritance pattern or prenatal status. These are all actually explained in the pre-test counseling, almost taking 45 minutes or 50 minutes. That's important because if we spend that, then the post-test counseling becomes easier for us. So in this case, we explained that risk assessment still stays as 20% because we haven't found anything genetic factor right now, and this test also has covered the CNV analysis. So we were confident enough that there is no gross chromosomal abnormality we are also looking at, and the child didn't have any indication for a chromosomal abnormality there. And since we didn't find anything in the child, so we are not going to offer any kind of prenatal invasive testing further. And but the pregnancy should be followed up routinely, and we have the current pregnancy should be followed up routinely and recommended for the scan, echo, and and the postnatal period should be monitored, right? So there is one term I have written here, that a GM analysis at 2.5 to 3 months of age. What is this? I will actually come later after I explain the next case. So this case is preconception. So there is a couple who came, Lisa, who is 30 years old, and his husband Parth, who is 29 years old. They have been married for 2 years and recent starting to plan for their family, and they have read their friends have friends children. Some of them have, one of them got autism, so they're worried and they have come and opted for a genetic counseling to understand what is the risk of their future children having autism. Okay, so this is an NCM couple. They're non-consanguineously. There is no history for Lisa in PCOD, PCOS, nothing, no drug exposure. Husband is a smoker and occasional drinker. Family history suggested there is nothing. Only part mom had one miscarriage, but in the other distant family members, both the family side, there is nothing. Lisa's Lisa's maternal uncle has little bit of gait imbalance and peripheral neuropathy after he crossed his 45. So that was one history. Apart from that, there is nothing further. So we did explain that in the population, if there is no family history, then the relative risk for autism is 1 to 2%. General population risk, according to WHO, is 1 in 100 children has autism. We also explained that autism can be caused because of genetic, because of the environmental factor, and there is a lot of polygenic factors for autism to happen. And then the question came to us that is there any test to check the risk for autism? No, we do not have such a direct test we can actually understand if there is any autism or something, but then we can definitely offer them the carrier sequencing. Right now there are papers which suggest that in our population around 10 to 13% risk we have to have be a carrier for a rare disease, genetic disease. So they have been explained about the carrier screening and offered a carrier screening later on. So these are the guideline. Yeah, I'm sure that whoever have joined us, they have already, if we are from genetic background, then we have all gone through these papers. If not, please go through. These are very important. There are a lot of new guidelines have come right now. We are having some specific Indian specific guidelines also. Start reading. The more we read, the more exposure we get, the more voice we can raise against anything happening in India. So these are the papers where we can actually suggest, by showing them, we can suggest a couple carrier screening. Also, so there is a question that if something comes back, then is there any kind of risk reduction strategy we can follow? So yes, there are a lot. You can see that there are perinatal risk factors, which we know that gestational diabetes, weight gain, birth spacing is very important. Then there are autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid, inflammatory disorders. These are definitely can cause, and this should be intervened at the right time before the pregnancy is planned, and mother should be actually given the proper care, because what we say is mother is a primary school. So proper improvement should be there. We know that folic and folinic acid is required. There are evidences also already, omega-3, vitamin D, multivitamins, iron, choline. These are not only to support the to reduce the risk of congenital defects, but it is also to support the brain development of the child. So these are very important. We should always empower and give information this to our patients, whoever having a child with autism, not having a child with autism. For any a person who is actually planning for pregnancy, we should be given this information for a better care. Yes, I was mentioning this is a body, and very importantly, mother. I have heard a very renowned developmental pediatrician from Hyderabad to say that we call mother's body as the primary school. So whatever we eat, whatever we think, there are epigenetic modifications can happen. Stress, we know the stress management from the amygdala. We know that there are a lot of evidences coming for the epigenetic expressions right now. Some other day maybe we can actually talk about epigenetic modifications during the pregnancy, which can lead to certain kind of epigenetic diseases. Those actually can be spoken further. But yes, a good healthy pregnancy, not only during the pregnancy, prenatal. It's not natal. I think it's an antenatal, prenatal, premarital thing should be started. Considering our lifestyle right now, we should be very much careful taking care of our body, and to just maintain that it's actually a temple to it is the womb which creates another life. So we have to be very much careful about it. So what are the reproductive option? Of course, it is your choice, your body. If anybody is found to be genetic carrier, then options we already know that the prenatal testing can be offered. We can also offer the IVF with self gametes followed by a PGTM if financial positions are there. If this testing facilities are available, then we can definitely opt for it. Donor gametes, yes, we can definitely, as a counselor, as a genetic counselor, we should always offer all the possible options and let our patients, let our mothers and fathers can choose what they want to do. These are the antenatal monitoring, fetal monitoring. We all know about it. This has to be done properly during the pregnancy, and uh, and this is important. So nowadays this is called general movement assessment. Now this is a drive happening right now. General movement assessment is already established a test which is done just looking at the child by the specialists who are qualified to do this, to understand by the rhythm of their movement, cry, their smiling pattern, their hand pattern, to understand whether the child will go into a cerebral palsy or a neurodevelopmental condition. Now, so for cerebral palsy, this test is actually has having an accuracy of over 90%. But nowadays, after a close monitoring and a lot of research, even this is considered to have around 70% of accuracy for autism and neurodevelopmental condition actually. So for cases where there is no genetic background, even there is a genetic background or something, but if we cannot identify any genetic factor there in the child and the next child is born, then general movement assessment is a very crucial test. If you uh, in your practicing zone, if somebody is actually qualified enough to perform this test, do look for it. There are developmental pediatricians, there are physiotherapists who can actually perform this test, and this is a very good thing. So this high risk pregnancies, we definitely we here offer this general movement assessment at around 2.5 to 3 months of age. It's a months of age, so we don't need to even wait till the child shows the the disease symptoms. Why? Because it has been now proved that we do if we do early intervention, like not even till waiting till 2.5 years of age, before, if we start doing the intervention for this neurodevelopmental condition, the outcome is much better. We call it as a first 1,000 days, I think, till the pregnancy, and then year two come, then the time the reaching 3 years. So these first 1,000 days are very important for these children to have a better outcome, and the more better intervention we can actually try to provide, give them, this is we have a better outcome for all these children. And there are many cases where now we are seeing that the child had a risk, but it did not develop anything, and very mild delays have happened, and the child is doing absolutely fine now. So yes, genes are the like the story, and DNA is the language the story is written in, and we all, as the team, can help to interpret the same. I acknowledge Dr. Ranjan Bhattacharya from the Navajatak Child Development Center, the parents and families here for supporting me and for this wonderful cases. Thank you so much, and I move on to the interactive session, I guess.
I think we have a question from Nadir.
Can
And
I?
Nadir, you can go ahead and ask, or if you anything you want to share.
Yeah.
Is he there?
It was a very nice presentation, ma'am. First of all, it was a very insightful presentation. And so my one question, because I'm working as a genome analyst right now, right? And a lot of cases with non-syndromic autism, they are very difficult to analyze because there is nothing else to look for, and there's just very less genes which would have just an autism presentation.
Mm-hmm.
More or less, even the report that you showed for the variants that were identified in the prune1 gene. So with that also, I personally wouldn't want to report it with a person who has autism because there is very less correlation, and Even OMIM does not really present with autism as a phenotype for that gene. So it's very difficult from an analyzing standpoint ki if it's just non-syndromic autism, how how it's just difficult to analyze. So
So, yeah, I think Nadir also has the similar kind of from laboratory analysis perspective. What do you think doing isolated WS and versus trio-exome missing of candidate genes in isolated WS by GAs bioinformatations and how we can overcome it? Yes, I think both are very similar, but I would just go for one by one. So, since I have been also in the analytic part for a long time, I think, for these isolated cases, okay, where it is a I won't say isolated, this is a non-syndromic cases. There are good papers right now. You can actually go for it, and you see a list of de novo genes which are repeatedly being reported for this kind of manifestations. Okay, so more than understanding the pathogen, see, pathogenic and lightly pathogenic identification of them is very easy to get it. You feel it out. But here the problem is actually scoring the vows. Okay, so the vows plays a very good role, and that is where the trio actually plays a role, because there can be in, if we do another for your thing, like I think the gap, we know the better rate, because when we do a trio we are actually scoring the vows in a better way, especially for the autosomal dominant cases, right? So we are actually scoring them in a better way because we can get to see the inheritance and we know what is happening. Nowadays, there is another thing coming out that this variable expression is a question mark. But still, if we do actually follow, not many a times it is, possible for the lab to this ABC model again to cross code the vowels. But then if you have found that there is a significant vowels which are, and the gene is being reported for variable expression, those are the types we should be reported, and let the geneticist and the genetic counselor to go further to know whether, because during the pre-test session many a times, even after working so many years, there are cases where how many times we have asked the parents to open up and share their stories, their histories, childhood histories, what kind of schooling they had, what kind of environment they were. There are many times it doesn't happen, but after the report comes and if we triggered them that this can happen, they actually open up, अच्छा मेरे साथ ना ऐसा हो सकता होता था, एंड पता है एक बार ऐसे मुझे बुखार में फिट आई थी. तो
hmm,
those things comes up. So if you have a good validated scoring, scored vows, you should report that. Okay, and let the geneticist and the, at least from the lab perspective, if we do not give pass on the information,
hmm,
that becomes many times misleading.
okay. Hmm.
So I think at least even if you do not want to mention it on the report, at least you should mail the referring
Hmm.
person and ask them to go for a genetic counseling to for further
Hmm.
uh, further analysis of interpretation of the report. That's very important. And Nadir, your answer, I think overcoming this gap is very difficult right now, because laboratory analysis, laboratory में कुछ नहीं कर सकते. Laboratory will be only dependent on the clinician and the counselor, or on the geneticist, whether they are getting a trio or not. But yes, every time I think whenever we get an isolated case, however we are writing that parental segregation is important,
Hmm.
I think we should start writing as parental sequencing together as a trio should be analyzed. That line, if we can now start introducing in our report, that trio exome is much more, at least if we get the parental sample and the trio analysis happens, that is more important, because even if we go for segregation, the other mutations or the other variants
Hmm.
which have been not scored properly because of thinking that these are vows and it might not be effective there, these are missed. So those can be other better way, you know um, addressed. I hope this answers your question, other. But yes, I think nowadays I heard somebody selling exome sequencing at 7,000 rupees. So in our population, har ghar DNA agar ban jayega, then definitely we can expect the child and the parent to go for trial testing. It is true for the prenatal setup also, right? It
Hmm.
is not for only for the neurodevelopmental condition. This is true for many times in the prenatal setup. The other day, Dr. Ratnapuri was actually giving a talk, and she was mentioning about prenatal trio
Hmm.
exome sequencing for cases. So those that saves time, that saves money, and that gives a better outcome of the test. And we being the genetic counselor, it is our responsibility to spread this word and make people understand how we have done for the exome, how we have done for the chromosomal microarray. Now it is time that we actually tell them that the need for trio and the whole genome.
Right. So, does anyone else have any questions, stories to present, or anything they want to discuss?
Thank you, Pasna. That was an amazing presentation. I have a question. So when we talk about autism and when we talk about taking their clinical history and asking them about family history, so sometimes it can happen that in Indian family scenario, people try to withhold the information, or as a genetic counselor, you use certain tools to get the accurate information. So how do you approach family history taking wherein you feel that the patient is not talking a lot, or you feel that you're not getting an entire picture? So how do you approach that psychosocially?
Well, I think I would really. This is absolutely my way. Okay, this is nothing to do with the genetic counseling guideline or something, because certain times we need to actually step in. Certain times it is when we see that after giving you a lot of understanding ye family history is important, a little bit of psychological hit is also certain times important, that agar aap nahi batayenge then we cannot understand this. If you are not telling me, then you are going to mislead me. Okay.
Mhm.
So in my experience, certain times that works. And people who are actually coming from the peripheral region, they are more open about it. Trust me, they are more open about it.
Mhm.
They will be actually giving the full faith, keeping full faith on you. They will share. uh, Many a times it happens that people come with a lot of family members. I make a point that I do not sit with the family members at the first time. Okay. I always make sure that the parents are sitting with me in any setup. It's not only about the the autism and all. Anything is happening, I make sure that I speak to the couple separately first,
Mhm.
because that's important. That has to be understood by our population by this, in by 2026 at least. We are in this era. So then I take it to the family counseling part. I do talk to them, but then I make sure that the couple, they get to understand. They give me much more information. They open up to me while talking. I let them call their parents. I let them call their family members if they need any information, and they want to share that. I give them that timing. I think when you give that timing कि हाँ मैं हूँ, आप बताइए, that gives them that comfort zone, to make them understand that okay, she's there to listen to us, she will help us, and that opens up. And as I mentioned, there are still families who are, most of them, they are Google read. They think that they know much better than us or any practitioner there, and they have a lot of limitations telling the thing, and they will only tell. It's like it's just a presumptive notion, कि इतना ही बोलना है, इतना ही करना है. Those people, I give them a bit of certain time of um, a very we call it as a sweet knife. It's very important certain times to give them, to make them understand. And but of course not crossing our barrier of non being non-directive. So that is taken care. And then as much as we talk, make them feel comfort, trying to get into their psychology, that helps. And I think over the time, when you gain experience by looking at the people, by coming in, you will still understand, okay, ye yahan se hai, wo wahan se hai. And the social belt from where the patients are coming, That also gives you a lot of information that okay, this periphery will be having this kind of history, this part of the country will have this kind of approaches towards life. That also, that ethnicity, even inside the same country, also gives us a lot of information there.
Ma'am,
Yes.
Yes,
ma'am,
go
and
ahead, Shreya.
sometimes when the case is like uh, when the child is been adopted, or if it's a IVF, when the donor it's a different donor, then it's hard for the for us to communicate. It's hard for the parents to tell us that, oh, this child is IVF or it's adopted. Then how do you deal with that kind? Because no matter how many times, we can't ask again and again about that also.
How do I take it? I first listen. Okay. uh, Ask very minimal questions, because for these cases for adoption, IVF, by listening to them, I'm sure if you talk to them in a better way and keep talking to them, just talk, you can actually get to understand that if they have that guilt of adoption or IVF and on, then actually that's a tricking point where to start your counseling first. Okay, whether to understand the child's genetic perception, genetic factor is actually their query, or they're actually dealing with their grief that they have gone through all these things and then they're having a child with these difficulties that actually bothering them. So once you get to understand what actually is their care query, from there you start your counseling. That helps. I'll share a story. Recently, what has happened? It's not even a week. It is a trauma. A very. We also should take detox sessions. And this has actually led to me. I had to take a detox session. This is so much to take in. So there was a case, online counseling part from Pune. The patient came, and it is a 2 months child report they have sent me, baby girl report sent me. And there was a history written: the child is a premature child having septicemia. Then convulsion started from day one, and there was a one mutation reported, which is classified. I don't remember the disease, but it is classified as a VOWS. Okay, so and it is an autosomal dominant condition. So like this, the child, our counseling started. So the first thing the mother said, कुछ बात करने की ज़रूरत नहीं. I just introduced myself. I was like, yes, tell me what happened. नहीं, मेरा ये बच्चा है और इस बच्चे को अभी day one से ऐसा प्रॉब्लम है. पता है, हमने ना IVF करवाया था. Okay. As okay, then the next question, IVF you with your self gametes? नहीं 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 नहीं, अपना होता तो ऐसा नहीं होता. Okay, so they have actually taken an embryo donation. Okay, and from a very renowned place, I won't say that, but then entire case is very much fishy. There are a lot of things were happening, and you won't trust me, because of this donor embryo and all, the mother is now in that medical mental state that she opened up and told me that मुझे इस बेबी को रखना ही नहीं है, I want to give her away. So I'm still trying to convince her to meet a psychologist, but they are not, they're not agreeing for that. But as I mentioned, that first impression, talk to them, understand what actually they are talking to you. They haven't actually taken the appointment for me to talk about the genetics, because they already knew it. They just wanted me to tell कि इस बच्चे का कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. Okay, so very important, Shreya, whenever you are getting this kind of cases, deal their psychological, factors first. If you cannot, we cannot, I cannot, I'm not that psychological counselor properly. So I take my colleagues' help to make them understand. Once they're down with our own frequency, then they match the frequency, then we start the genetic counseling.
Thank you, ma'am.
That was a very interesting case. That was.
Yes.
Uh, and it was very distressing, actually. Certain times the cases are very distressing. The way the mother behaved,
Hmm.
it's not a judge, but it was a lot to take for me, even that,
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
It's a perception. It's a perception for, and I cannot deny her perception. She's going through. She's telling that her child is not letting her touch even. She
Hmm.
just cries. She just cries. She's frustrated,
Hmm.
and she wanted to abort the child because there was a IUGR reported at 6 months.
Oh.
Okay, so from that time, the
Hmm.
mother started, tolerating. The mother started fighting with it, and then
Hmm.
now she's in that. We cannot be. She's frustrated. She badly needs help. She badly needs help. There is another question, I guess, in when Nadir has asked, when we get all the reports for ASDs as normal, how do you counsel for the families as the parents wants to know something about the child prognosis? But being a counselor, when we are also clueless about the genetic etiology, what psychological support you give them? Yes, that's what I actually mentioned during the case presentation. That this actually the support in my practice, I prepared the parents before going for the testing. Okay, so the pre-test set the expectation what we are actually going to get and what we are not might get. Okay, so in my case, I take much time for the pre-test counseling to make them absolutely understand कि if there is no answer we are getting, I give them a reverse psychology also, that as I mentioned, no report is a happy report. When there is no genetic background, we are finding the prognosis might be better actually. If I know that there is a gene mutation which is actually causing the disease, then the prognosis might not be, the response of the therapies might not be that better, right? But when we see that there is no genetic factor, there is still a scope of the child of being better, and there is nothing like, बहुत सारे diseases में ऐसा होता है कि अगर if that is the case, the gene is there, they have a tendency of developing seizures, or they have a tendency of developing some other kind of condition in their little life, which are also saved right now when we are not seeing. So telling them that one side, yes, we are not able to find it, but the other part is also a good part,
Hmm.
that making them understand always help. Set their expectation in the pretest, during the pretest. That is very important. Unko yaad rahega, and write it down. Of course you need to document that you have actually told that this is the yield, this much we are actually understanding. Because वो जब वापस आएंगे ना, वो पूरे टाइम पे शायद प्रेस्क्रिप्शन नहीं पढ़ेंगे, बट when they enter, before that they will at least read, oh मैम ने ये बोला था. That prepares them.
Right, so there is one more question that says that is there any genetic testing available for the autism cases in pregnancy itself?
No, there is nothing. Uh, there is nothing available during the pregnancy. It
Hmm.
is always start, if there is an affected child, always start with the affected child. If there is no affected child, it's a preconceptional. Even in the conceptional thing, you can only offer a carrier testing for the parents. You cannot test the fetus for autism. There is nothing. Okay, so never test a fetus for autism if there is no confirmed diagnosis have been made earlier. Genetic diagnosis have been made earlier. Thank you, Mansi. After so long, I am seeing you. Thanks.
Right, so I think we can wrap up the session. It was such an amazing session, ma'am. It was so nice to have you. And
Thank you so much. It's
we would
my
be,
pleasure to
we
be
would
here.
be more than happy to have you again for some other topic, some other Friday.
Done. We have a topic to discuss, I guess.
Yes, yes, we do.
Yeah, that perception of
Yes,
Shivani we
yes,
need to
yes,
discuss.
yes. That is still remaining. So I think we can have a panel discussion on that with two, three people who attended the session and just talk about personalized genomic. ठीक है,
Right. Done.
ठीक.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, Mayuresh. Thank you, Sukritik. Thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone for
Thank you
joining
so much
in.
for
Have a great
presenting.
weekend. Thank
Hi,
you so
ma'am.
much again for
One
giving us
minute.
time on Friday.
Shreya
Yes,
has something.
yes,
I
yes.
think Shreya has something.
Ma'am, if you don't mind, this is like not related to autism, but I just wanted to know. I just want a internship for like few days or like for a month or something. Is there somewhere like how do I go or something? I don't know how to do so.
Okay, I think It's a good news. I still haven't taken interns till now after this many years, but I think I'm opening up for now. So, and I am going to come in a bigger way, in a full setup for internship and courses. So, just reach out to me, Shreya. I think from January we are going to start this, and I'll share the details with you.
Ma'am,
But
I would
specifically,
truly
this is going to be initially it is going to be focusing on the prenatal cases. But yes, if your interest is there for this kind of pediatrics, we can definitely accommodate.
ma'am, any ID something so I could text you or
Yes, of course. I can just share. You are there in our group, right? The genetic counseling group you are there.
no, ma'am, I'm not there.
Okay. So that's my email ID I have already shared in the chat box. You can see my email ID.
Shreya, you can also reach out to the counseling genetic counseling journal club page that we have on LinkedIn, and then we can also try to figure out how to
Yes.
connect you with other
Oh,
people also if needed.
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
ma'am.
much for
Have a
hosting
great
us.
weekend.
You too. Thank you. Nadir also has a internship program. There are many people. I think Shreya, you
Yes.
just write to us. Many of us can actually help you out for
Yes.
internship. You know, and yes, Nadir is
Yeah.
very hard with Dr. Dage with for neurogenetic thing.
Yes.
And wonderful. Kudos to you, Nadir. Very happy to see there, and I'm very. This is a very close, personally close topic. So you can definitely reach out to him also, Shreya. Many of
Thank you,
us
ma'am.
are working there as an observer. I think you can definitely reach out to us.
Yes, ma'am.
I,
Sure.
I
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
also I also see a future session where we can have all the senior GCs who can guide our students coming in for internships and help them land some observerships.
Yes, and I'll be the student there.
मैम
I
आप
think
अपना इंटर्नशिप
we,
स्टार्ट करके
yes,
स्टूडेंट थोड़ी आप फिर स्टूडेंट्स को पढ़ाओगे आप.
अरे नहीं यार, स्टूडेंट होने में ज़्यादा मज़ा है। सी द सीनियर्स विल कम इन, तो वो मेरे भी सीनियर्स हैं ना, कुछ तो मेरे भी